Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is a game from round 2 of the 2012 Tal Memorial between Vladimir Kramnik and Alexander Grischuk. Kramnik on the white end opens with the flexible start, knight f3, and really until we have any particular pawn moves, we don't know what type of opening we're going to be getting into. So black also being flexible on move 1, c4, g6, knight c3, and an opportunity for black's d5 advance or the Grunfeld. That is sidestepped, instead bishop g7, and with now e4, we're entering a King's Indian defense. So some more moves out of this line run as follows. First, d6 to secure that knight's position. d4, building a center is white. Soon enough, black will look to strike at it. First, castling, bishop e2, the first strike on d4. White castles, a second strike on d4, and only now does white commit with d5, closing the center, kicking the knight back, and already after just these 8 moves, the stage has been set. White will be looking to play on the queen side because the furthest advanced pawn is on the queen side. For black, black will be looking to play on the king side since their furthest advanced pawn is on the king side. So b4 indicates the bayonet attack, and the c5 advance is looking to be played. Black ignores it, immediately running forward with their advance on the king side, f5. And an important detail is what to do in response to a5. If you're playing b5, good luck, because what you just did with these last 2 white moves, you just bought black all day to generate whatever type of play they want on the king side, because there is now no successful pawn break on the queen side. So what do you do in response to a5? Well, you play bishop a3, and if takes, of course, you're recapturing, and you're in a spot to get into c5 advance. But what if b6? Well, now you get your a-pawn involved. In short, you're creating pawn exchanges, you're creating open lines on the queen side. This is what you need to be doing. One additional sideline is, if at this point after bishop a3, if b6 is played, you can't run with c5 just yet. You do that, there's this in-between shot, and black is doing well. So what do? You first play b takes a, and now there's no need for black to resolve this tension. This pawn can't move anyhow, it's in a pin. And so running forward with more progress on the king side in the meantime, preparing f5. Now we have white playing bishop b4. Now this is threatened, only now should black capture. And now the bishop backs up. It seems like not a whole lot was accomplished by coming to b4 and then coming back to a3, but it is significant because now at least the bishop's in a position to facilitate c5 and crack at that d6 pawn, the black pawn structure. And in short, pawns have been exchanged, files have opened up, and this is exactly what you're needing to do on the white side. It's not played, but very, very important details. It is instead knight h5, again f5, as well as the knight eyeing f4. That is ruled out with g3, and now immediately striking at the white center. This move can be summarized as follows. Black is saying, I am content with giving white the bishop pair, and I am going to be able to corral a pawn that is passed on the e6 square. In other words, after this f5 move, black is allowing this knight to pivot on g5 and hop to this e6 square. Black does need to be content with giving up the bishop for knight. Black does need to be content with allowing that d pawn to be converted to an e pawn that is passed, and one that becomes a #1 priority to get rid of, because if the position becomes too opened, that pawn that's passed on e6, especially with the queen still on the board, becomes a great asset. So sometimes what you'll see is instead of f5, this first h6 move, but certainly, well, excuse me, h6 should just rule out knight g5. But certainly the more aggressive, the more critical line is just to immediately lash out at this white center, and that's exactly what we have. And trying to exploit, trying to take advantage of that weakness that has been left behind. Again, in your own games, look at not only what your opponent's pawn moves are doing, but what are they no longer doing. He's now watching over e6. White is looking to hop right in there. So mission accomplished on h5. The knight is coming back to put pressure on the white center. Bishop f3, reinforcing the e4 pawn. c6, more pressure. A lot of tension going on in the center right here. Black putting a lot of pressure on it, and white trying to hold it together. Bishop g2 is a move that had me scratching my head. I really could not make much sense of it. My thought was, okay, I guess just get this bishop involved and maybe bishop b2. Only a handful of moves down the line did I recognize the significance of having the bishop on g2 opposed to the f3 square. Let's see what that significance is. In fact, let's run with this particular move that I thought maybe might be a decent idea and see what sort of trouble maybe white could find themselves in. After h6, these next moves, by the way, are all moves that were played in the game, and I'm just trying to highlight the difference between having the bishop on f3 opposed to g2. We have h6, the knight jumps in, it needs to be taken because there was a fork, pawn takes, chop, chop, chop. You'll note that after this last capture, the pawn is hitting the bishop, and the bishop is needing to, of course, react. If you take the pawn, you allow d5, expansion in the center with tempo, and black is doing well having these pawns in the center. Also, if you're, well, you have to regain that pawn, otherwise it's basically d5 happening no matter what. But by playing this bishop move to g2, down the line after this capture occurs on e4, it won't be needed that the bishop is having to react. There's other moves that can be played, more important moves. So we do still have h6. The knight jumps in. It's captured, recaptured, chop, chop, chop on e4, and now there is no reaction needed by that light square bishop. So what gets played now? b5 was a move that I did not assess completely. I could not appreciate this particular move until a couple moves down the line as well. And I did see one thing, but I was blind to another. I saw that, okay, this makes sense because it allows for this light square bishop to be helped. It's breaking at pawns that are on light squares, but this pawn advance is also clearing the way for this bishop to have a great influence on the position, as we will soon see. So it's really neat to see just a single pawn move benefit actually both bishops. Okay, so we do have rook f6, and again, important to know, if you're capturing, it's just this expansion in the center. Soon enough, we have that capture occur, but with the key significant difference, having this pawn on b5 opposed to b4. Now, after rook f6, this pawn, again, a #1 priority. This guy needs to fall soon. We now have bishop to e4, with the key difference now being if d5, there can be first capture, recapture, and now bishop a3, and this bishop has a clear view of this knight, seeing how this pawn is just out of its way. And if now pawn takes bishop, well, the queens come off, and this is game over for black, getting the piece back and picking up the exchange. Extremely key difference. Okay, so after rook f6, we have bishop takes e, rook takes e, and black is up a pawn. But white has the bishop pair. Black is a bit uncoordinated. It's a bit awkward to see a rook on this e6 square. Another thing that you can kind of how else you can view this position is recognizing the king positions. For this pawn plus that black has, well, they have a little bit of a shaky king as well. So these all contribute in some way. I mean, white's going to be putting pressure on the black center. Again, shaky king position, awkward placement for the rook. This bishop as well, not so hot for as long as this pawn remains on e5. If this guy can't get rolling, this bishop is just kind of dead to the game. So running forward, more development, more pressure on the black side. Also clearing the way for rook d1 is a rook d1 move, which is what we see. After d5, there is no reaction by the bishop. Rook d1 instead. This pawn now being hit, this pawn being hit. A lot of pressure, very difficult to find a good move for black here. The move decided on, move 20, is king h7, getting out of the way of this diagonal, watching over this g6 pawn, freeing up in some way the knight or rook from its defense. And now some clarification in the center, c takes d, c takes d, and now queen to b3, placing this pawn in a pin. This pawn is caught in a crossfire, basically. Pin to the queen, and also pin to the rook. Rook b6 gets out of that pin, placing it opposite the queen. A couple natural moves, a4 to free up the queen from defense of this pawn, a6 to try and crack at it. And now bishop a3, and now this knight is going to be killed very soon. And not to mention, there are possibilities for bishop to c5, and this rook is running way short on squares. So we do have a takes b, bishop takes knight first. There's no need to resolve this tension. It can't be, nothing can be done for black because this rook is unprotected. Queen takes, and now rook takes. White clearly standing better, as can be determined just by looking at the bishops. We have a case of opposite color bishops and who has the more active of the two bishops. It's definitely white. This guy, again, dead to the game for as long as he's just staring at his own pawn. In fact, black would much rather just not even have this pawn on the board right now. It's just a liability more than anything else. So we do have, with now b4, a5, hitting that rook. It's not a threat just yet because this rook is unprotected. Queen f7, placing the rook in a pin, and now we have, with h4, trying to get in h5, basically cracking at the last key pawn that's on a light square. We have that stopped cold with h5, but after now a cool move, queen d1, black is having to now throw in the towel. Because what exactly is this queen move doing? It's really neat to see her running back to her home square and doing just all sorts of things here. What is she doing exactly? Well, firstly, she's now defending this a1 rook, and so pawn takes rook is a threat. She's also preparing to, or the rook is getting ready to play to this d7 square, landing a pig on the 7th right here, and hitting at b7, the queen, you name it, everything is getting hit, and also hitting at h5. And there's no good solution for black at this point. Just running with one example, if the rook were to play to e6, we could have the capture immediately on this square, but even more accurate is rook to d7, getting the rook there before the queen decides to come off in this direction. And if the rook blocks, well, we could have a bunch of captures. Queen takes, this pawn is falling, black is running for the hills, black is dead. And one other line might run as, let's say, the queen coming here. We could have something as simple as the queen taking the pawn, and then the queen just coming all the way back. This pawn is ready to fall. This pawn is ready to be passed as a result. Possibilities for queen coming out here with check at some point. It's bad news for black in every variation. So as it stood in this game, after the cool retreat back to her home square, queen to d1, black resigned. So that's all for this video. As always, I hope you got something out of it. Take care. Bye.